What up? Welcome back to another episode of the MLB Swing for the Fences show here on the Run Pure Sports YouTube channel. It is Wednesday, August 7th, and we are talking tonight's 7-game baseball slate, joined as usual on Wednesday by Mr. Travis Mangone, who is back in the mansion. He's got the grand piano back in the background. No more kitchen cupboards from New Jersey, or maybe you're still there and you just needed a different background. I don't know what's going on, but welcome to the show, Mangone, and thanks for joining me today. How you doing on this Wednesday afternoon?
Yeah, I'm in a different location in New Jersey, and it's not that the backdrop behind me is bad, but I don't know. I threw it up to see if it'd work, and I was like, all right, this works. So we'll keep the mansion for the day. But here to talk some baseball. And DC, I know I've claimed there's some slates with some elite pitchers, but this might be an elite pitching slate. I'll say that there's 3 guys at the top that we'll discuss that are going to be really, really good options and should be a really fun slate. I don't mind when the slate's a little bit shorter. I do love the 12-game slates and like the big ones, but I don't mind these ones as well. So I hate like the early slate that we had today, like the 5-gamer. Those are the ones I don't like. I'm not as big of like the 5 and 6. Like give me between like 8 and 12, and I'm pretty happy.
Yeah, we did see a reminder last night of the kind of the can't miss slam dunk pitchers. I know a lot of people played Pablo Lopez, Luis Castillo. I think both of them disappointed to some extent. And then Joe Ryan was, 65% owned on the early slate. He got injured, of course, but shit happens in sports. And those are kind of the reasons why we try to get off of the chalk plays when you can find reasonable options. I think it's a good move to do in general. And I do think that's maybe going to prove true tonight. Obviously, the chalk pitchers get there plenty of times. And, I would say there's so many good pitchers, like you mentioned, elite pitching slate. I do think it's going to be kind of spread out because all of these guys, Skubal, Kirby, Reagan, Sale, Peralta, right? There's a pretty good top 5, I would say, for a 7-game slate. So I do think that'll, spread out the ownership at least a little bit. And kind of like yesterday, I know it was a premium show yesterday, so a lot of you guys didn't get to watch that, but it was kind of hard to find spots that you were super interested in. It was obviously the Brewers who ended up getting the job done. Adames hit 2 home runs. They had a big, big day on offense, and we'll see if they can do it back-to-back because we will see, of course, Chris Sale have some pretty significant ownership tonight. We'll get to that game second on the slate, but we do start in Toronto, Baltimore, and Toronto. I was pretty high on the Orioles yesterday. They mostly disappointed. We did get a home run out of Jackson Holiday, who I had a lot of. And then they pinch hit for him with the bases loaded and nobody out to bring in the righty, which was an interesting choice. But it did kind of tell you what their plan is with the pinch hitting. The Orioles obviously playing to win, trying to win the pennant, playoff positioning, and they are going to pinch hit righty lefty quite a bit, it seems like, down the stretch, as long as they're healthy enough to do so. But anyway, for this game, we've got Trevor Rogers, who one of the, I thought, most bizarre trades of the trade deadline. I know the Orioles are so loaded with minor league prospect bats that they don't have a room to play all these guys, right? We've seen all season shuffling guys like Hunter Hiersted, Kobe Mayo, Jackson Holiday, Colton Cowser up and down from AAA to the big leagues. Ultimately, they cashed in on 2 of their prospects. But for Trevor Rogers, who hasn't been good in a long time, his first start for the Orioles did not go well. I was kind of waiting to see if maybe the Orioles changed something with him. Maybe they could find, or maybe, they traded for him for a reason, right? Find a way to get more velocity out of him or change his pitch mix or something like that. At least through one start, I didn't really see anything different. 5 earned runs over 4 innings against Cleveland, 3 strikeouts, 3 walks. Frankly, looked a lot like the Trevor Rogers that we're used to. So I do think Toronto is interesting here as a perhaps somewhat contrarian stack. And then the Orioles in another pretty good spot against Bowden Francis, who is the cheapest pitcher on the DK slate. He has not been good when given chances for the Blue Jays. making his first big league appearance here in actually, no, he last pitched on August 4th, so just a few days ago. I missed that one. But yeah, it's been a rough ride for Francis, and I do think the Orioles in a pretty good spot to put up some runs. Might be going back to them on this slate. What are you doing, man, going with Baltimore and Toronto to kick off the slate?
Yeah, it's worth mentioning this is a 9.5 total, so it's the second highest total on the slate. And I mean, if you're telling me there's a team on the second highest total on the slate, like the Blue Jays going up against Trevor Rogers, that won't get that much ownership, like, I mean, I just think it has to be a conversation point that we have to discuss, right? Like the Blue Jays team does not strike out a ton. I'm not scared of Trevor Rogers. I know he can have walk issues at times too, and when those walks happen, that's when you get those big, those big innings, right? Maybe he pitches around an Ernie Clement, and then, Vladdy takes him yards. So I like the Blue Jays a lot. I think they're a really good play. They're going to be one of the stacks I'm looking at today. I'm only playing one team tonight because, I want to like prep for the final a little bit. It's hard to choose one team in baseball, right? So I want to kind of get my mind right with that. And Blue Jays are on that list, right? So I'm considering the Blue Jays here. I think they're a good team to target. This game too, it's in the Dome. I don't know how much that matters here on this slate. As we go through it, I guess there are some hot weather games that we'll discuss. And there's obviously the Coors slate, Coors part of the slate. But for me, I'm probably just fading the Mets on this slate. So I'm not really going to care that much about ownership from there. That's kind of my current opinion on it. We'll have to see as we get through it. Maybe you can talk me back on the Mets, but I'm just considering a fade of them. I pulled it off yesterday, so I feel like I can kind of pull it off again today. Makes it a little bit easier when you kind of get away with it the day before. So like them, I don't want to sleep on Baltimore at all either. I mean, this Bowden Francis guy, you said he's the cheapest pitcher on the slate. And there's a reason why, DC, right? He's not very good. And this Baltimore team, one thing I do like about them is they have some decent value throughout their lineup right now. I mean, they've had guys come up and down throughout the season, and at times they've been very expensive, but with them sending guys up and down, it felt like it started ever since they brought up that guy Heston for a little bit, and they started putting some of their they've been putting some of like their cheaper bats towards the top. I think it's because like the platoon advantage stuff. I mean, they become way more in play to stack, right? You have Colton Cowser. He is getting more expensive at 4.3K. Don't get me wrong, but you have him up there. You got Mountcastle at 4K. I know he's a Blue Jay killer. I know you guys talked about that on the premium show a little bit yesterday. I know he's just absolutely somehow crushes them. You got Eloy down there at 3-1. Jackson Holiday at 3-2 has been crushing the ball. And then the Kobe Mayo thing, ever since they brought him up, he's a really nice value that just helps you to maybe get in like Gunnar Henderson and an Adley Rutschman. A lot of time when you are building your teams, you kind of had to make that decision. So I don't want to completely ignore Baltimore because I still think with the value that you have in the lineup, you can make it work. Now, of course, I don't want my entire team to be Mountcastle, Eloy, Holiday, and Kobe, which is one big bat at the top. I want a proper mix, but it does help make things a little bit easier with stacking them. I used to notice with Baltimore that a lot of the stacks weren't good, or you have to pick one or the other, and it was like just like a brutal decision. And I think this is a spot where with this value, you're going to be able to get one of these top end pitchers if you want and still get some pretty good Baltimore bats. So overall, this is a really strong game. Like I said, I want to be under on Coors, so I'm just not really worrying that much about that game, and ownership's not going to matter. So Baltimore and Toronto are firmly good offenses that I'm considering today here.
Yeah, I like that. And I think there are plenty of ways to go with both of these offenses. Obviously, some very expensive bats in the Orioles lineup. Santander, Gunnar, and Adley Rutschman all over 5K. You mentioned that back four, Mountcastle, Eloy, Jackson Holiday, Kobe Mayo. Three of those guys, Mountcastle, Eloy Jimenez, Kobe Mayo, are right-handed hitters starting against a right-handed pitcher, which usually means they should be safe from the pinch hit stuff. All three of those guys have a lot of talent. You put Jackson Holiday in the middle of them. I know he got pinch hit for last night, but he also, did what you wanted from him ultimately. He hit a home run early in the game. And I wouldn't be surprised after last night if they let him even bat against a lefty if that situation does arise on this slate. So I kind of like that, the wraparound stack a little bit. That back four for the Orioles, maybe you include the Colton Cowser leadoff spot, a little bit of pinch hit risk there. I do think we talked about it yesterday on the premium show. Holiday, Cowser looked like and then O'Hearn are the three pinch hit risks on this team. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see the Orioles do some damage, and wouldn't be surprised to see it from the other side as well. I think a game stack is okay here. I kind of prefer to get one side of it. Like if you play, a 4-4 game stack, 4 Orioles, 4 Blue Jays, it generally means that the game's going to be closer, right? If they're both sides are going to get there, and in that case, you're probably going to get most of the good arms out of the Orioles pen. You'll get the Orioles more likely to pinch hit, right, in a big spot if the game's close. So I kind of like playing one side or the other better than I like the full-on game stack, even though I do think that's in play. And I assume the roof will be open in Toronto as well. Looks like a pretty nice night there. So I'm expecting runs here. I think most of my teams will go one or the other. And I do like the Orioles side a little bit better, but I don't know. Trevor Rogers is a guy that I haven't got to pick on as much this year as I wanted to, because he played half his games in Miami, right, where we just don't want to roster that many hitters. So I like this Orioles team. I think with them, I prefer the top half of the lineup. Vladimir Guerrero's been on fire. Springer has really picked it up in the second half of the year. That Springer, Ernie Clement, Guerrero, Kirk, and then Horwitz. Those top 5 look good, but the bottom 4 have an average price of like 2.6K or something. So I do think there's a lot of bats in play in this game, and I'll certainly have plenty of Baltimore and Blue Jays myself, at least for hitters. I'm not playing either of Francis or Rogers on this slate. Just too many good options. Those guys are, you never know. But for me, at least, pretty much completely out of play on this slate unless you're playing 150. Even then, don't think I would have too much at all. Let's get to a game that looks better for pitching than it does hitting. We go to Atlanta, frankly, for one of the better hitting. Obviously, it's generally hot and humid in Atlanta, but tonight in particular looks very, very hitter-friendly with 90 degrees, 50% humidity, fairly strong winds blowing straight out to center field. We should see the ball flying in Atlanta tonight. We've got Chris Sale, who has been amazing all season long. He's really only had a couple of hiccups along the way. He does get, looks like 8 right-handed hitters in Milwaukee, where we do think the ball is going to be flying. They did a bunch of damage yesterday, and I still like Sale a little bit. I think he's a totally fine play, but I think I'm going to lean elsewhere on this slate from the 10.3K Chris Sale. Just looking at most of these bats, they do strike a little bit of fear in me, at least the top 6 or so with Chris Sale. So I don't think I'll end up there myself. Again, very reasonable play. Just I'll probably look elsewhere. It'll be Freddie Peralta going for the Brewers. The Braves have a kind of a surprisingly high team total here, sitting around 4.5 runs. Peralta has been, not flawless this year, not nearly as good as Sale, but still a good pitcher, a good strikeout pitcher. And I think we might get him somewhat low. And Sabres got him at 17%. I kind of think he's going to come in below that, given that the Braves are fairly big favorites, sitting at minus 165, and have a pretty high team total, around 4.5 runs. So I think there are multiple ways you could play this game, but then what are you doing yourself with Brewers and Braves?
Yeah, this is a great game to discuss because there's so many nuances to it. So DC, here's my first question for you. What we always like to talk about the ownership game, and I always like to say, there's got to be a price, right? If Tariq Skubal was 99% owned and Sale was 1%, you would easily play Chris Sale in this spot. So my question here is what does the gap have to be ownership wise? Because currently on Sabre, we have 41% on Skubal and 25% on Sale. And if you told me those were the numbers, I would lean Skubal. Now, once you get to I'd say, let's say the difference is 50-25. I think I'd start considering Sale over him. If you got to 15% versus 45, which is a 3x difference, I would definitely want to be on Sale over Skubal, right? So that's my question. Where do you have that at? Because I think the Sabre ownership has it at a point where I think it could settle opposite ways where either Skubal gets more steamed or it gets like even closer. So that's kind of my question. Like, where do you think it's going to, where do you need it to be to play? And where do you think it'll be?
I think these numbers seem reasonably accurate. Like you said, they've got it 42% Skubal, Saber does 25% Sale. And I do everything you said, I agree with. If what they have projected is correct, I would want to be on the Skubal side. But yeah, if you got to 45 Skubal and 15 Sale, which I don't think Sale will get that low, then it would be the Sale side. And it's one of the things that's changed about DFS, baseball, and other sports too over the years. 5, 6, 7 years ago, you used to just be able to kind of say, like, we didn't even really have all that many ownership projections, and people, weren't quite as in tune. And it was kind of like, I'll just play my guys and hope that the ownership is not as low or as high as it could be, or as I think it will be. But now that it's more accurate, you do have to take those numbers more into consideration. So I think it's a good point. Right now, like I said, I don't think I'm planning to play Chris Sale. I'm playing 3 lineups tonight, and none of them so far. I did build them all out. We don't have all the lineups and stuff, and things can change. But at least as I stand, none of them had Chris Sale. I think I had Skubal on 1 or 2. So that's where I stand. We'll see. Oftentimes, SaberSim will update their ownership projections while we're on air. We'll certainly talk about that if they do. But right now, at least at 25% Sale, I'm leaning going a different direction. Where do you stand?
Yeah, I lean the same thing right now. And again, my opinion could totally change. That's why you need to be in the Discord. That's why you need to, be a member at Run Pure Sports, right? It definitely helps. We'll discuss these things. But that's kind of my thought process on it. It's hard to give that opinion. I'll say this though. Milwaukee, I pretty much say it every slate. They're pretty much always in play. It doesn't matter who the pitcher is, especially if they're a chalky option and no one's going to play them. And no one's certainly racing to play Milwaukee today, especially in this hot weather. And me,
I got some interest in the Milwaukee power bats a little bit in this weather.
Okay. I'm assuming like the field doesn't, right? Like I should look at they're like not even owned. Like this game, the crazy part is this is one of the best hitting environments and it's not actually owned on the slate. Also, if you look at the total, which got to trust Vegas a little bit. 8 total is definitely not bad. There's some worse ones on this slate for sure. So I don't think it's crazy at the ownership. Also, the Braves, they will be low owned. And listen, the Braves have been awful. I totally get that. They will be low owned on this slate, and they're going against Freddie Peralta. And this is another ownership question, DC. I agree. I think you're going to see Peralta like in that 15% range. But if he somehow got up to like 25 or so, because people just want to stack against the Braves now with the pitcher, you could make an argument that the Braves are really interesting in tournaments at low ownership. Because when Freddie Peralta is bad, it's the walk problem, right? And that's where the fantasy points can accumulate. So I really do think that you don't want to completely ignore Atlanta today. Listen, if I was MMEing, I would probably want a little bit exposure to both sides of this game because it doesn't take that much to get overweight. And for me right now, I actually like Freddie Peralta over Chris Sale, knowing the current ownership. So it's one of those spots where you can kind of make the argument for both sides. I know it's like a little bit of a, wishy-washy thing. And sometimes people just want that take. I'm definitely playing this guy, but there's always one game that's like that. And this is one of those. And I think you just have to really think about the decision on this game specifically. You just don't run it and load up on it. You have to really think about what is the ownership? How do I handle this situation? I think it's just super important on this slate.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I agree with you as well. So right now, like we said, they've got Sale at 25%, Peralta at 17%. I don't think Peralta's going to hit that number. He's a big underdog here. Braves have a big total. There's plenty of other options. So that's my prediction, is that Peralta is one of the pitchers where the projected ownership gets squeezed a little bit. And I've got some interest. I'm not afraid anymore to play pitchers against this Braves team. I really haven't been since, April and May. Obviously, the lineup has gotten worse since then. I know they've added some bats, but it's just not that scary of a lineup for me anymore, especially for a right-handed pitcher with a really good slider. Soler, Riley, Ozuna, Arcia, all these guys, I think he can get to chase that pitch outside the zone. So I kind of like the low-owned Peralta on a slate where we are going to see, heavy ownership on just a few guys. I do like flipping it a little bit, and I do feel really confident, Mangone, that Peralta will not be higher owned than Chris Sale as an underdog on the road with much higher team total against him, all that stuff. So I do like Peralta a little bit, and then I don't think I'm going to full stack against Sale, but I don't mind. I think all of Churio, Hoskins, Gary Sanchez, William Contreras, Willie Adames, Joey Ortiz, even Blake Perkins, he's 2,800. I do think all of these guys individually are decent plays, but you're really hunting the home run against Chris Sale, especially given the weather. I don't think he's going to implode with walks. Even when you look at his bad outings, it was like he just gave up a bunch of power, leaving pitches out over the zone. So, if you're not on Sale, I don't mind mixing some of this power from Milwaukee into your lineup. Again, I think a full stack is too far unless you're, playing a ton of lineups. But if you're playing 1, 2, 3, 5 lineups, maybe grab a Gary Sanchez, a Contreras, and Adames who hit 2 home runs yesterday. I think that's a decent way to go in this one. And I'm with you on my 3 teams. I'm not playing the Braves tonight. I'll let someone else go down with the Braves. Just not the way I'm going to go in this particular slate, even though I do agree they will have relatively low ownership tonight. Brings us to Tampa Bay and St. Louis. Interesting pitching matchup here. We've got Taj Bradley going for the Rays. He's been really, really good. Kind of quietly put together a strong season since coming up I think in mid-May is when he made his debut. He's been excellent in the month of July, making his first start in August here. A lot of kind of surprisingly low strikeout rates from the Cardinals starters tonight, most of whom swing from the left side. So probably enough to keep me off of Taj Bradley, although it does look like he will be pretty low on this slate. Sabres got him around 10%. And then Eric Fedde going for the Cardinals, trade acquisition over from the White Sox. His first start there against the Cubs did not go especially well, but I do think he profiles pretty good in this matchup. This Tampa Bay team is one to target. I think with right-handed pitching, a lot of high strikeout rates, not that many great hitters, not that many great left-handed hitters. And Fedde's been pretty solid this year. He's 7,700. I do think he's going to slip through the cracks just a little bit in terms of ownership. Sabres got him currently at 12%. So I've got some interest in Fedde here. I don't really see a huge point in going to many bats. Pretty cool, and some winds blowing in St. Louis, so it should play pitcher friendly. I'll say Fedde is my most intriguing option, probably my most rostered player in this game overall. What are you doing, man, going with Rays and Cardinals?
Yeah, I love the Fedde call. You and I have been on Fedde from like day one this season. So I'm definitely team Fedde, especially against this Rays team. Basically, anyone pitching against the Rays, you just have to have a conversation about it and think about it. And with the way Fedde's been this year, I mean, he was good enough to get traded out of Chicago, right? To be looked as like a decent piece for a team. I think Fedde's a really solid play. So I'm in on Fedde, like him here. Taj Bradley's the tough one. Good points that you brought up. I know the Cardinals can do that where they get like really heavy with like their lefties or righties at times. Definitely one thing that they're pretty good at doing with their lineup. If you told me Bradley's ownership was like at like 5 or 2%, like, and I know it's not like a big deal, but like, I think that matters a little bit. If you told me it was like even lower, I think I'd be more intrigued by him, but at the 10, I'm not as excited. And again, I know we're like, feels like we're like being really nitpicky here, but I think it matters a little bit for sure. And again, good slate. He's 9.2. Also, if like he wasn't 9.2, like let's say he was like 8.2 or like 7.7, like Fedde, I think I'd be more interested in Bradley. I just think he just feels a little priced out for me. And honestly, for the most part, I don't want to play this game either. It just doesn't seem like one that's exciting. 76 degrees, winds blowing in. I'm just not super excited about this game. I think if you force me to pick, I'm kind of similar to you. Like Fetty and MME would probably be the guy that I have the most interest in. And listen, I don't hate mini stacks. Like if you play like a Brandon Lowe one-off or minis of this game, I'm not going to tell you it's crazy, but I'd mainly be chasing power when I do it.
Yeah, I mean, to your general point on, talking about ownerships and it's a probability game. It's much easier earlier in the season in baseball, right? To get on some guys early. You get into August and we've got a full season of data on these guys and, kind of what the type of players they are, pitchers especially, start to converge. I mean, you'll see the same thing in NFL, right? We're going to have some dudes out, some rookie wide receivers. Roma Dunze is 4K for week 1. Like he's going to be a way better player than that. And you see the same thing in baseball, but we're to the stage, be like week 13, 14 in football where the prices start to normalize. And once you start to get, it's just hard to find an edge on the projection at this point in the year where you've got stable numbers for most of the hitters, most of the pitchers. And so you do need to factor in the ownerships in with those numbers more at this point of the year. So that's kind of why we're doing it. But yeah, I mean, specifically, yeah, Fetty looks good here to me. I think I might be rolling dice. Sounds like you might be in on some Eric Fetty as a way to, get some floor and ceiling, but also get just a little bit away from some of the more chalky options and get a little bit of salary savings as well, because there's not that many offenses that look super great, at least in my eyes, on the slate. So that savings can certainly go a decent way to getting you to a more unique team. Let's get to Boston and Kansas City up next. Similar weather to St. Louis, going to be about 80 degrees, modest winds blowing in, some humidity as well. Cutter Crawford going for Boston. He's been chugging along all season. He has had a little bit of a bump in the road here, but looks like the same guy that we've seen most of the season. I do think he is a good pitcher. I don't think I'm going to get there against Kansas City, who do have some of the lower strikeout rates in baseball in the lineup tonight. So Crawford, I think a cross-off for me, definitely prefer the aforementioned Eric Fetty to Crawford. But Cole Reagans, I think, is a pretty fun play here. Looks like he is going to get quite a bit of ownership. Sabres got him as the third highest owned pitcher on this slate, currently sitting around 30% projected ownership. But I like him quite a bit. Boston is one of those weird teams where when they face a right-handed pitcher, I'm usually on the Boston bat side. When they face a lefty, though, these strikeout rates really jump up. And I think Cole Reagans could potentially have a ceiling game here at home against the Red Sox. I'm in on some Cole Reagans tonight. What are you doing, man, going with Boston and Kansas City?
Yeah, I'm curious to see the Reagans ownership, because I could definitely see that one yo-yo around a little bit ownership wise and like either go lower than you expect or higher. I'm with you on the Cutter Crawford stuff. Like if you look at his props, and I'll pull up FanDuel for you, his strikeout number is 3.5. Now it's heavily juiced on the over at -170, right? Like I'm not going to go out here and bet
3.5 is pretty crazy though. Yeah,
it is crazy. But like when I pulled it up, I was just like, well, obviously it's heavily juiced at -170. And like, honestly, like it just makes me not want to bet that. Not shouldn't say bet it, but not play him, right? Because when you look at the upside of all these other players on this slate, just not that excited about it. His outs is at 17.5. Same with Cole Reagans, and Cole Reagans' strikeout prop is 6.5, heavily juiced on the over. So like it's clearly good for Reagans. I'm with you. People aren't going to want to attack Boston. I could see Reagans' ownership go down a little bit more. So I definitely think he's an intriguing option at 9K. Now, will I get there? We'll have to see when kind of things shake out, but he's definitely in the pool, in the conversation. If I was MMEing, I would definitely want to take chances on that. I'm not super excited about this Royals team. I just don't know if I love the upside against Crawford. Like, sure, I don't want to play Cutter Crawford, but do I want to attack him on this slate? I just really don't think so. And if you do attack him, like you could make the case, like, it's fun to do, like get the one-offs in there that are like the good power bats. Well, do I want to spend 6.5K or 5.3K for Bobby Witt or Sal Perez? Like, listen, they're good plays, like on almost any slate. You can always say Bobby Witt Jr. is a good play. But my point is if I want to spend for some of these top end pitchers, like it is going to be tough for me to get those guys in. So on this specific slate, the Royals seem like a fade. Same with the Red Sox, and it's really just Cole Reagans or bust for me.
Yeah, I really need to turn off underdog notifications on my computer here because 50 slow drafts in the best ball streets, and they're keep coming up here to click off it. So I need to go in and fix that. But I'm with you on this game in general.
For what it's worth, DC, I can't hear the dings if they're dinging. So
they're not dinging; they're just popping up in the corner. It's like, FYI, it's your pick. It's like, yeah, I know. I got 8 hours underdog. Leave me alone. But yeah, I'm with you on this game in general. It's really just I really like Cole Reagans. I do think he's going to end up probably in my core on my main team. But other than him, it would probably be the main bats for Alone, Bobby Witt, or Pasquantino has been red hot. I think he's an okay play. On the other side, if you're not on Reagans, I don't hate playing a Tyler O'Neill, something like that, trying to get the home run. But overall, I think this is a Reagans game, and I'm probably not going to get to a whole lot else on it on my 3 teams personally. Up next does bring us to Coors Field. Mets let me down a little bit last night. In another good spot here tonight. Not quite as good of a spot for the Mets, in my opinion. Their total is close to the same as it was, sitting right around 6 runs against Ryan Feltner. We recently got the Mets lineup, so yeah, pulling it up pretty much as expected. They do have the lefties in there. Nimmo, Winker, McNeil, and even Ben Gamel are in the lineup tonight against Feltner, which makes sense. He does have some pretty severe splits, much better. I would say much worse, I guess, would be the phrase I would use against lefties than he is against righties. He's not that great against either side, but certainly you can attack him with lefties. Should be pretty decent hitting weather, 75, 80 degrees, winds blowing in instead of out like they were yesterday, but certainly good enough weather for offenses to get the job done. By far the highest total on the slate, sitting at 11 runs, 6 of which are projected on the Mets side, 5 on the Rockies side. And then the interesting thing is the Rockies bullpen in terms of lefties, it looks like they only have one, and it's Chasen Shreve, who they just called up yesterday from the minor leagues. He's a 34-year-old who's pitching in the minor leagues in AAA, not pitching well. So I assume he will probably pitch in this game, but I could easily see the Mets leaving their lefties in there, especially if it's early on in the game, because it will be, I believe, all right-handers out of the pen other than him. So I do kind of like these Mets lefties. I know there is some pinch hit risk for McNeil, Ben Gamel, Jesse Winker, but I think on this slate I'm willing to take that risk, especially for a Winker who's hitting third. I mean, McNeil's been hitting better. It's obviously Coors Field, so I do like this Mets team again. It was hard for me to get away from them yesterday. Ultimately, when you turn the slate over, it should have been something that I did, but I might be going back to them here, depending on how my builds shake out. And then Paul Blackburn, pitching for the Rockies, traded over from the Oakland A's. Had actually pitched okay for them this year, but some pretty severe home road splits where almost unbelievably, a 1.4 ERA at home. Obviously, those were in Oakland, and then 6.4 ERA on the road. Now he's got to pitch in Coors Field. I know it's against the Rockies, but I do think this could be a decent spot to go to some of these Rockies bats against Blackburn, who seem to thrive in that great pitching park in Oakland, struggle elsewhere. Now he gets the toughest pitching park in baseball. So really both sides of this game look pretty good to me. What are you doing, man, going with Coors Field today?
Yeah, I told you at the top, I'm not really looking to play Coors Field that much. One thing I'll say about Winker too, I know was watching one of the Mets games, and they said like the Mets are like purposely like not like they're pinch hitting Winker a bunch because he wasn't playing that much in the field. So they were kind of like getting him back in the groove. Now, I don't know if like now is the time that he's perfectly fine, but he is in Coors, right? Not an environment that is great for guys that aren't like in the condition to play in the field every day. I know it's just baseball, but that's what they said. So I don't know. Winker isn't a 3-hole, but he could be very chalky and could be someone that just only gets like 2 at bats and then is out of the game. You never know. But and especially with him hitting with Winker, right? I'm not with Winker, with Nemo in front of there, they could easily bring a lefty in just for those two, and then it kind of messes things up. So overall, I think that the Mets are going to be a fade for me. I do not mind this Rockies team. Blackburn is definitely not a guy to be scared of. Now, is Blackburn this? Is he this stud that's going to obviously dominate in Coors? And could he not get blown up? Yeah, of course he couldn't. But the Rockies could definitely be low owned here. There is some weather here. It's an 11 total, so you're going to deal with some rain. But you know how Colorado is. They normally get the game in. They figure it out. So I'm not that worried about it. And I think this Rockies team isn't bad. If you look at, Tovar, Doyle, McMahon, Rogers, Toglia, Diaz, like those are probably like my 6 favorite there. Then, of course, you have Chris Bryant, who I hate to play, Charlie Blackmon, 4-5, my favorite guy to play, and then Jake Cave at the bottom, who is definitely a rough roster at times. But that 6 I mentioned, I do like, and I think they're interesting as a 5-man. So I will probably stay away from the Mets tonight, but I'm not going to completely ignore this Rockies team. We'll see if I land on them, but I think they're in the conversation because, again, Blackburn, not really scared of him. And don't forget, this Mets bullpen is not good. And this Mets bullpen in Colorado, especially if Blackburn struggles first time out, it could get a little rocky there for this Mets team.
Yeah, people that don't live here in the Denver area, like we get very, very little rain. Once it gets outside of April and May, it almost never rains for a prolonged period of time outside of the passing thunderstorm, which even those are rare. So I really never worry this time of year outside of very rare exceptions of getting a postponement in Coors Field. You can look up the history of, games getting PPD'd in Coors outside of April and May, and it just almost never happens. So if you are on the bats from this game, certainly don't let the weather deter you, which maybe it will for some people, right? They see a 40, 50% chance of rain. They want a reason to get up off Coors Field. Don't let that be the reason if you are trying to get it. It could potentially affect pitching, but I don't know. I mean, I assume you don't have interest in either of these pitchers. So, yeah.
And honestly, Feltner's not bad, DC, right? Like I definitely don't think he's like a guy that you want to target. Now, I know this Mets team doesn't strike out a ton and they're a good offense, but I just don't, at the ownership, I'm going to pass on it.
That's fair enough. Yeah. I mean, he's, I think, an okay pitcher. Holding his, doing decent for pitching for the Rockies, but certainly not enough to scare me off the Mets. I get it. Coors Field's just kind of one of those. You just got to kind of make your decision and live with the results. I lean playing it, but I certainly understand going a different direction on this particular slate. Brings us out to Detroit and Seattle for our second to last game of the night. We've still got the Dodgers and Phillies to talk about, but we get to a pretty prime pitching matchup here against 2 bad offenses. Tarek Skubal going to be going for Detroit. Closing in on an AL Cy Young Award, which I know myself and I think maybe you do too. I know Boyden has tickets on him to win AL Cy Young, so been rooting him on from that perspective for sure. And it does, we're not quite there yet with award season playing a big impact, but I do think it kind of helps his leash a little bit. He's going to go 95 plus pitches, I think, most times out, assuming he can stay healthy. I love picking on Seattle, of course. Did it yesterday with Cater Munoz. I don't think that's his last name. Whoever it was came through for the most part. So I do like Skubal. I do definitely like right-handed pitchers better against Seattle than lefties, but nevertheless, Skubal is a strong play here. And so is George Kirby, who, like every other Seattle pitcher, pitches much, much better at home than he does on the road. He gets a Tigers team that has plenty of strikeouts, not a lot of punch, no Riley Green, just really not many bats to fear. I know, Colt Keith has been okay in the second half of the year, but awesome matchup for Kirby. He's not going to walk anybody. He's going to pound the zone, and I think he's got a good chance to go very deep into this game. Would have no problem, really, loading up on both of these pitchers. I do think that'll be a pretty popular option. Not going to play too many bats here myself. Over to you, Mangone. What are you doing with Detroit and Seattle here?
Yeah, I mean, this game definitely sucks from a bats perspective. Clearly, both these pitchers are really good. But to kill some time, DC, I talked with one of our good old friends, Dean 78904 today, and he gave me a trivia question. So I'm going to give you the trivia question. It's about this game. Chat can contribute and have fun as well. I don't know if he's going to do it on his show, but George Kirby, how many games has he had 0 walks this season?
I assume it's higher than no. You know what? I know he's walked like 15 guys the whole year, so I'll go with 11 games.
You nailed it. 11 is the number.
Did I get it? Wow.
Yeah, he told me 11. I did a quick count like while I was on the show, and so
I was actually I was the third call. On the silence call, like old school back. That might have been before your time, but we used to. I don't know if you did that. Like some person's like silent on the phone listening in back in middle school or some shit.
Yeah.
That was me with you and Dean. Yeah.
Yeah, 11. So you absolutely nailed it. He's been amazing, right? And this is like the matchup for it, right? Like he's going against the Tigers. The Tigers don't walk, right? Like this is such a perfect spot for George Kirby. So I absolutely like him here. He's going to be one of the best pitchers to get exposure to him. So is Tariq Skubal, right? It'll probably be a very popular combination, but we talk about this stuff in the Discord too. I know we talked about it with Steve yesterday. You can make a decision like which pitcher are you playing versus which offense. And I wasn't playing the Mets, so I was perfectly fine with playing Luis Castillo. I didn't care about that ownership. And if I'm not playing the Mets, I don't really care if I play a Skubal and Kirby combination. And I'm definitely considering it. I don't know if I'm going to land on it, but I'm definitely going to look at that one very strongly because I think it's just a great spot. I mean, these two offenses in this ballpark, just everything lines up well. So no bats for me. And I'm definitely going to consider it. The interesting part is, since I'm doing the after hours playbook, just to tout that up a little bit, DC, there's a 2-game night slate. Skubal and Kirby. And then of course the next 2 games that we'll get to, which are Stone and Phillips, like those dudes are going to be like 80 or 90%. That if you really don't like Skubal and Kirby today for some reason, that's the slate to go and play. I know your alternatives are Gavin, Stone, and Phillips, who we'll talk about here, but if you don't like these 2 options, that's the slate where you're going to see insane ownership and can get some leverage.
Yeah, the problem is everybody likes Kirby and Skubal, but yes, if you don't, actually both these slates, the normal and the night slate, look good for you because we're going to see ownership on Kirby and Skubal. Trevor Bryant asks, reason you wouldn't game stack Baltimore and Toronto. We got a little bit of time here, so I can answer this one in a little bit of depth. I think people game stack too often in baseball, whereas usually you see teams go off. Like it's more lopsided than it is in football or even basketball, where I'm a big believer in the NFL game stack, right? Mahomes and 2 of his receivers, and you get a wide receiver bring back. I actually think it's a little bit anti-correlated or negative correlation in baseball because if both those teams go off, the game's going to be close. I kind of mentioned it when we talked about the game initially. But you'll see the better relievers if the game is close, whether that's a 0-0 game or a 5-5 game. You'll see the teams use their best relievers if it's close. So that's the reason why. And not to say that I wouldn't do it, but if I'm playing, 3 to 5 lineups like I normally do, I think you are better off going in on one side on each individual lineup. That's when you get when you're up 5-6-0 or 8-1, that's when you get the worst relievers out of the bullpen. That's when you get a position player pitching. You don't get that on a game stack where both teams are doing damage. So that's a reason why I don't generally go for game stacks in baseball. Again, Coors Field is an exception. If both teams have terrible bullpens, that can be an exception. But in general, I do think you're better off going with one side of the game in baseball, whereas in football, in NBA, I think it makes a lot more sense.
I like it more on shorter slates, DC, like these some of like the 5 or 6 gamers. I don't think people want to go in on one game then. I think they like are less likely to do that, but that's just my opinion on
it. Yeah. And again, I don't have the exact numbers to back it up. I personally think people game stack a little bit too much in baseball as opposed to just playing one side or the other. But that's just my thoughts on the situation. Yeah, that's Detroit and Seattle. We're both on the pitching here, and yeah, I mean, if you do like the bats in this game, load them up because they are going to be have no ownership really whatsoever, and you're going to get leverage against 2 popular pitchers. So not something I'm doing, but again, if you do like the bats and they do go off, you're going to be in a great spot tonight at the end of the slate. Let's get to the last game on the slate. It is the Philadelphia Phillies, Los Angeles Dodgers. Tyler Phillips, Gavin Stone. 2 okay real-life pitchers. Neither of them have too much strikeout upside. Kind of average weather for Los Angeles, even a little bit cooler than average. And we do have, a 9 total in this one. So runs are expected. I do think the Dodgers are going to carry some ownership, which hard to argue with, an Ohtani or a Freeman or even a Dodgers stack now that they've gotten a little bit healthier recently. I don't have much, if any, interest in either of these pitchers. So it would be the bats that I would go to here. But where do you stand on this one, Mangone? Phillies and Dodgers.
Yeah, I'm definitely not dying for either of these pitchers on this slate. Again, elite pitching slate. I don't think you need to go there, but I kind of like the bats a little bit. And I think you could argue for both sides here. I want to see what the lineup's going to be. I know the Dodgers lineups have been a little weird as of late, but it's getting stronger with the Freddie Freeman. And honestly, Mookie Betts is going to be back soon. So we'll see what those Dodgers look like in the next couple of weeks. But I definitely don't mind them here against Phillips if I can afford them. And it makes sense with the pieces that they have in the lineup. So we'll see what they put out there with their cheap options. And I like the Phillies here against Stone. I know their total's a lot lower than the Dodgers, but this Phillies team can hit anyone. If you're going to get them at lower ownership, sign me up. So I'm definitely considering these ones. This Dodgers and Phillies game, I think will be under-owned. And I like that Baltimore and Jays game. So those are 4 of the teams that I'm really looking kind of strongly at as some of the teams I want to kind of stack up today. Even the Rockies. I know that was another one I mentioned. Those are probably the 5 offenses that I'm really looking at tonight as my key spots.
Yeah, makes sense for me. I do think the Dodgers lefty bats, those are their best hitters in general, but Ohtani and Freeman do profile pretty well here. Phillips has given it up a little bit to righties as well. So I could see this Dodgers being one of the teams to get a little bit different. The problem is they're really expensive, right? So the guys that you want, you're paying for, and they really got to do a lot of damage to get there because you're not going to be able to get most of the top-end pitching with the top half of the Dodgers stacks. That is all 7 games. Benair, do you want to give us a take? Or you're too distraught? I don't even really know what he's talking about with Frank the Tank, but maybe you do, Mango. It's a question clearly directed at you.
This is actually, you could answer this when I explain it better. So Frank the Tank is this, I told you, he's this Mets fan that gets super upset about the team and always complains about him.
Our school guy, right?
Yeah. And so he actually threw out the first pitch in Colorado last night, which is, he's thrown a lot of first pitches out, but
I'm surprised you didn't make the flight back here so you could go watch your guy Frank the Tank throw out the first pitch.
I wish I was there. I could have maybe found him at the game. But so here's the thing: he is a diehard Mets fan. The Mets fans don't like him that much, or the Mets broadcasting network, because he just complains a lot, right? And is super negative, just like a lot of New York fans are. They're just super negative about shit. It's just it's a typical New York fan. So he threw out the first pitch last night, but he was wearing a Rockies jersey while the Mets are there. And it's one of those like jerseys that says Frank the Tank on the back, right? Because he's thrown out the first pitch. So you kind of have to wear the team's jersey and they make it for you. So do you throw that first pitch out? Now, again, it's not like you're a Yankee fan throwing in Boston, right? You're a Mets fan throwing in Colorado, for the shitty Rockies. I don't know. I'm okay with it, but for instance, if it was a Michigan fan wearing an Ohio State jersey, I think that's a huge problem. But because it's just a shitty team, I don't think it's a huge deal. But what would you do? Would you wear the opponent's team's jersey while you're at the stadium with your own team?
No, I think that's too far. I would have no problem.
Even if you got a custom jersey that says draft cheat on the back and everything, and you're throwing the first pitch.
I went to a Wolves Nuggets playoff game, which that's kind of the closest thing I can think of. I am here in Denver, but I'm a Wolves fan, and I wouldn't have taken a half court shot with a Jokic jersey on my back at that game. I wouldn't have done it. So I'm gonna have to say no. Bad move by Frank the Tank is the DC ruling on that one.
Yeah, he was getting a lot of shit, and I understand why on Twitter, but like
if it's not his own team, right? If it's the Rockies and any other team, and then he wants to wear the Rockies, but if the Mets are playing, you can't have the other team's jersey when your own team's in the stadium. I think that's too far.
Yeah, I don't think he thought that through, but I don't know. It was definitely very, very intriguing to see because I mean, a lot of people were very upset by it for sure.
He's happy to get the clicks in the comments, right? It's like any publicity is good publicity, they say, and I think that's probably true for Frank the Tank as well. But all right, let's get to the stacks, pitching, all that stuff. We'll start with you, Mangone. Favorite stack on this slate and favorite contrarian stack?
Yeah, favorite stack. So contrarian stack, I'm gonna go with we'll go with the Blue Jays. Because you said they're gonna be kind of contrarian today, so I'll go with them as the contrarian stack. The best stack is the Mets, but I'll say favorite stack is the Rockies, just because I do think that Mets bullpen is bad, and Coors is definitely a good spot to always target. So we'll go with Rockies as the best stack, but my favorite contrarian stack is going to be the Blue Jays tonight.
I'm joining with the Blue Jays, so we'll just throw them out there as my overall favorite stack.
And you can honestly flip mine, DC, right? Like Rockies will be low on 2. I gave you 2 low.
Yeah, we'll flip ours and have the same 2 answers. I like Rockies and Blue Jays quite a bit. I'll have some Mets as well. But yeah, those are the teams that I'm going to. Boyden wants the 30-second recap of the show, which I guess he's joining at a good time because he got our favorite stacks. Now he's going to get our favorite pitchers, who I think we might land on the same guy here as well, Mangone. But your most important pitcher on this slate, which sounds like you're playing one team. So give me one of the 2 guys who you think is going to make that lineup.
Yeah, and the
lower on one.
Yeah, I mean it's Skubal or Kirby. I will say that I'm struggling with that decision on FanDuel because I think I haven't looked at ownerships enough there, but Kirby could be like way lower on. Like typically Skubal, I assume, just going to be like the straight chalk. So I'm going to lean as Kirby as the guy. I think he's going to be the guy that I definitely want to make sure I get a lot of exposure to. So we'll go with him. It's a great pitching slate though, for sure.
I'm taking my man Eric Fetty. So thanks for leaving me, Mr. Fetty. He will be in the Coors tonight, no question about it. Home run call tonight, Mangone. Who's going yard?
Yeah, I will say with pitching again, too, one thing about FanDuel specifically that I love about these kind of slates, like Freddie Peralta could just be super unowned, like on this slate, like out of nowhere. So, like, because there's just so many studs to pick from. So that's another guy that I think is super interesting over there. And we talked him up a lot earlier in the show, Steve. So we do like Peralta a little bit. Your home run call, is that the question here?
Yes, sir.
Home run call. Let's go with Vladdy stays hot. Vladimir Guerrero. He takes Trevor Yarder's yard.
We'll stick in that same game. I think he was my call yesterday too, if I remember correctly. Perhaps not. But Jackson Holiday, I think, gets another one tonight. Love to see him swinging the bat well. Hopefully, won't be pinch hit for tonight in a big spot. But Jackson Holiday goes deep for the Orioles. Finally, Mangone, your favorite overall hitter on the slate?
Yeah, favorite overall hitter. Let's go with he is pricey, but hey, you asked for the overall guy that scores the most points. We'll go with Gunnar Henderson on Baltimore. They're obviously another stack I like, and we haven't talked about them enough in this segment, so we'll give Gunnar Henderson a nod there.
Yes, and just because Boyden's here and I want to tilt him, I'll go with his favorite player in the league, Simple Jack, Jeff McNeil. Going to do some damage in Coors Field against the Rockies tonight. I think he's sitting 5th tonight. So yeah, we'll go with that. Thanks for the confirmation, Steven, on Jackson Holiday. Hopefully he gets another one for us tonight. That'll do it though for this show. We've got a decent amount of games tomorrow. So I believe we'll have the normal show to 4:45 Eastern time. We'll have, of course, Coors, all that stuff up for both slates on Thursday and in the Discord over the next hour and 15 minutes or so, getting ready for this 7-game slate. Appreciate all you guys watching. As always, hit the like button on your way out if you haven't yet done so. We'll see you tomorrow, same time, same place. Until then, he's Mangone. I'm DC. We're out of here.